Hi, welcome back. Today's Tip Tuesday. Today we're going to discuss contingency to sell buyer's property and what that means for the seller. A home sale contingency is a clause included in the contract when a buyer makes an offer to purchase a property. When a home sale contingency is in place, it is contingent upon a buyer selling their property in order to purchase another property. If the buyer's home that they're trying to sell falls through or does not close escrow, then the buyer is not obligated to move forward with the purchase. So this limits the risk for a buyer. The form that is used to add this contingency into the contract is a contingency of the sale of a buyer's home, otherwise known as the COP form, C-O-P. There are different ways this form can be completed and what it means to the seller. It's really important to have a detailed discussion with your realtor if you receive an offer that has one of these contingencies included. But let's talk about the risks for the seller. There are 3 things that I recommend that you be aware of. So number 1 is the contingency upon a concurrent close. This means that the buyer has to sell their home and it has to close escrow before they can close escrow on the home they're purchasing. So a concurrent close. Now the risk involved is that if you go all the way through the transaction and we do our inspections, appraisal, loan, and buyer removes pretty much their contingencies, and then at the very end, they back out because their home fell out of escrow, now you're back to square one. The buyer has a right to get their deposit back based on that contingency to sell. Number 2, the next thing to be aware of or to ask your realtor is what is the current situation with the buyer's home? Is it not even on the market yet? Is it listed for sale? Or does it already have an accepted offer and the property is currently in escrow? So the reason that I say that that's a really important question to ask is because of the risk that's involved. So if the property has not even been listed yet, why? What is the current situation? So then you're basically going to be taking your house off the market while the buyer tries to put their house on the market, start marketing it, and then sell it. If it is listed, especially in a competitive market, why hasn't it sold yet? Maybe it was just put on the market, which is reasonable, or maybe it's listed too high. So what are the current comps? Did the buyer price it accordingly? That's something that your realtor can actually look at. They can pull comps for that house. Or does it have an accepted offer and it's currently pending? That's really beneficial because they have already gone through the marketing phase, accepted an offer, but what is the situation with the buyer that's in escrow on their home? Do you have a copy of the sales contract? What escrow company are they with? Have you verified the funds for the buyer that's purchasing their home? All the things that you would want to do to pre-qualify a buyer purchasing your home, you want to also pre-qualify the buyer that's purchasing their home. Because again, this is a contingency for your buyer to sell that home. So you want to make sure that buyer is a really strong buyer. Number 3, is there a release clause or hasn't been removed? So what does this mean? The release clause allows the seller to continue marketing the property for a backup offer. And if you do get a backup offer accepted, then the seller has the option that they can serve a 2-day notice, could be more or less depending on how the contract is written, to give that buyer with the contingency sale a notice to remove that contingency, or the seller can opt to cancel and take the backup offer. Now, sometimes there are different ways of handling this release clause. Sometimes it's extended. For example, the seller can't impose that release clause for at least 17 days. Or the other option is just remove it altogether, which means you can continue marketing the property with the possibility of getting a backup offer. So what are the risks? Well, if you have that clause in effect from the time you get accepted to the close of escrow, that means you never have the option to try to get out if the buyer hasn't sold their home until timeframes expire. If you have the clause where it's implemented for 17 days, that you can't give that notice for 17 days, then you're tied up basically for 17 days waiting for the buyer to perform on that contingency. Option 3 of the release clause, which is the one that I always like to include, it's kind of open. And if a backup offer comes along then you can opt to serve the 2-day notice and advise the buyer to remove that contingency, and then you can take the backup offer. So this has probably been one of the most difficult Tip Tuesdays that I've done, to be able to condense this contingency in a 3 to 4 minute video, because there are so many different factors involved and there's so many variables. So again, I just want to emphasize, it's really important, if you are a seller and you receive an offer with this sort of contingency, that you have a very detailed discussion with your realtor and they can explain how it affects you and what the risks that are involved. So again, we want to thank you for tuning in to our Tip Tuesday, and please don't forget to hit the like button if you like what you see. And if you want to get notifications every Tuesday, hit the bell and also hit the subscribe button. Thanks again, and we'll see you next Tuesday.